Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Robinson Karamarka. I'm the co-chair of the CUNY-IO, CUNY Industrial Organization of Practitioners Network, alongside my colleague Clemente Diaz. And today we have a special presentation for you guys. In case you're new to the group or this is your first time participating, the CUNY-IO group, the purpose of it is to apply and learn about industrial organizational practices, the research theory, and apply it to the workplace. Today, we have a special event and we have Joseph Regina here to talk to us a little bit about work, family, balance strategies, and share a little bit of insight that we could potentially take back to our workplace or different departments that we are in. With that being said, Joseph, welcome and feel free to take it away. Go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. So as we just kind of recapped, I'm going to be talking today about work-family balance strategies. Just to begin, I'd like to give a brief overview on who I am, just so you're aware that I'm qualified to talk about what I'm going to talk about. So, hi, I'm Joe. I'm a fifth-year PhD student at the University of South Florida. I'm really fortunate in that I get to learn from Dr. Tammy Allen, who is one of the pioneers of work-family. In line with that, I study the links between work and health pretty broadly. One piece of that is looking at work-family, and specifically my dissertation focuses on work-family within an LGBTQ plus population, looking at the unique challenges over there. The other thing I wanted to highlight is I grew up in New York. I grew up on Staten Island, so not too far from Baruch. I looked at Baruch for undergrad. I applied for undergrad. I applied for grad school. Baruch really does feel like a community college to me. It's right over the bridge, right ferry away. So it really is a dream come true to get to talk today. I highly doubt it, but if anyone else went to Port Richmond High School, throw it in the chat. Just thought it would be a cool thing if it happened to come up. But thank y'all so much for having me today. I'm really excited. So what are my goals for today? Because I always think it's good to tell y'all where I'm going. So to break down the different terminology of work and family, as you're going to see, the terminology kind of sounds the same, but they are importantly different. We're going to go through why we should care about work and family and how they fit together. We're going to talk about the strategies we can use to combat work-family conflict specifically. I'll talk about why I'm focusing on work-family conflict on my next slide. And then ideally, I'm going to leave 15 to 20 minutes to answer any questions. Really what I want to make sure I'm doing is giving y'all the information you want. And I figured the best way to do that is to let y'all tell me what you want via open question, answers, and dialogue. So like I said, I'm really excited. So full steam ahead. So like I said, the terms sound similar, but they are not the same. So think about this kind of like a tortoise and a turtle. They look the same. They kind of sound the same, but they are meaningfully different. So work-family balance is going to be the pop press term that everyone kind of uses colloquially. Within our literature, that term is relatively new for us. And it's caring for employee well-being is pretty much always listed on the SIOP top 10, as is work-family. It's really cool. I do have the chat open on my screen, so if you have anything that you're looking to ask or blurt out or let me know what you're thinking, please comment it. I am here to provide. So in terms of work-family balance, the way that we've operationalized it is it's going to be this piece of satisfaction. So do you feel like you're satisfied with how you're doing do you feel like you're satisfied with what your life looks like in terms of when you're at work, as well as when you're at home? And then the second part is going to be performance, which is basically, do you feel like you're being a good employee? Do you feel like you're being a good family member, whether that's spouse, parent, child, significant other, caregiver, so on and so forth. So that's the idea of balance. Work-family enrichment is when one domain helps you manage the other. This is one of the ones that we don't typically think of as quickly, but it is really important, right? So examples here that I like to give. You learn how to use an Excel sheet at work, and then you go on a big family trip and you make this big, neat Excel sheet that helps you make sure you don't forget anything. That's work-family enrichment. You get really good at organizing your kids, then you take those same organization skills and you apply them to your job. That's work-family enrichment. So basically, anytime one domain helps you develop a skill that you can use in the other. A really geeky example I like to give, because I hadn't really been able to think about it too clearly until this moment in my life, was I broke my PlayStation. I did something stupid to it. I unplugged something I shouldn't have. And I figured out that I could either send it to PlayStation for a few $100s and maybe they would fix it, or B, I could go online and find the steps that were suggested online. And I looked it up and it was long-winded technical steps. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. And then I realized, wait, Joe, you do this every day when you write stats code. And I was able to follow the instructions the same way I would when I write stats code. And I was able to fix my PlayStation and save myself a few $100s. So just a fun example of work-family enrichment. Today, though, I'm going to be talking about work-family conflict. Why work-family conflict? Because that's really where the majority of our literature has been focused. There's maybe 10 years of information on balance, maybe 20 on enrichment, and we got like 40 or 50 on work-family conflict. So that's really where we have our cleanest suggestions. It's where we have the best understanding. So that's where I want to give you the research-based suggestions and whatnot. So work-family conflict, really easy to visualize. It's when the demands of both can't be met. So my work needs something from me, my family needs something from me, same time, and I can't make that happen is a really easy way to think about work-family conflict. We'll talk more about the specific types as this presentation goes on. Before I go any deeper, I always like to take a brief second to confirm that I'm not moving too fast in terms of my speech. So if you could just give me a thumbs up or a chat thing to say, okay, slower, faster, that would be awesome. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's the number one complaint I get from my class the first day I teach it every time. So if I do end up going too fast, please let me know. So before we dive into the technicals, I want to give an example. So we're going to start with this conflict scenario. So what I'm going to do, it's going to sound weird. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a split second. And I'm going to read the scenario to you. I want you to imagine the scenario to the best of your ability. The characters can look however you want them to, so on and so forth. So let's talk about a hypothetical scenario. There's a small business owner. His company is doing well, but by no means is he well off. So imagine what he looks like. Imagine his family. He's got a daughter. Maybe he's got a dog. In my head, he's got a mustache. I don't know why, but he does. So just imagine this man for a split second. Okay, now I'm gonna give you some more details. So it's a Wednesday. He knows his daughter has a soccer game at 6 p.m. You can feel free to open your eyes, keep them closed, whatever you want to do. But it's a Wednesday, just like today. And he knows his daughter has a soccer game at 6. Pretty typical day for a parent. Nothing crazy going on here. However, 4:30 rolls around and a customer calls with an emergency. And he knows immediately that he can't take the job and attend the game. So now the question becomes, what do you do? So we're going to use the chat function. I always find that it helps to keep these things engaged. So if you could just type in the chat, either soccer or work, whichever one you would pick. I'm going to take an informal poll. So we got 1 soccer, 2 soccer, 4, all soccer so far. We got 1 work, soccer, soccer. Give it another 15 seconds or so. So yeah, typically when I do this, I've done it a few times. We end up with a pretty clean mix of work and family. Some people say soccer, some people say work, and we could all kind of see why you'd pick one or the other. It doesn't really seem like there's a clear decision. It's not egregious to pick one or the other, so on and so forth. But now I want to give you some more detail. So what if it's the daughter's championship game? So for those of us that said work, are you still saying work or are you now saying soccer? So yeah, now we have a pretty clean amount of soccer. Most people are like, yep, it's a big event for my kid. I'm going to go to the soccer game. Work can wait. That's okay. However, I'm going to give you some more information. What if the customer is a major client and that getting them would change the entire trajectory of your company and you've been trying to get their business for months? Let's try something a bit different here. So if you're thinking soccer, give me a thumbs up emoji. And if you're thinking work, give me a thumbs down emoji. Not to load the question at all. So we're still saying soccer, it looks like. So soccer is going to be thumbs up, work is going to be thumbs down. So yeah, now what we tend to see is a bit more people that are leaning towards work, and we can all kind of see why. This is a major, important event, but nonetheless, family is still important too. So it can go either way in this instance. Now to give you one more piece of information, which is, what if you missed the last 6 games because of work? And as you were leaving for work this morning, your daughter said, you're coming tonight, right, Dad? It's the championship. And now I've done this enough times to just go ahead and say that for the most part, this is the part where everyone in the room kind of has that like sad looking look on their face. So I'm going to assume that's the case here. And this is really where it comes down to is there's not an easy decision with work-family conflict, especially as we get into the actual details of people's lives and their needs and their wants and their dreams, who they want to be, who they can be, so on and so forth. And the part that I always think is so striking here is, I don't know about y'all, but for me, the mere hypothetical scenario as we walk through it, it's stressful. My heart rate goes up. I get a little anxious. I get a little jittery. It's not an enjoyable experience. And we're talking completely about a hypothetical man that we all imagine differently and a hypothetical kid in a hypothetical soccer game. Now imagine what that's like in real life. And I think we've all been there in some way, shape, or form, but it's distressing. It's not ideal. The other thing I wanted to ask is, what is the source of the conflict in this case? Is it work or is it family? If you think it's work, type that in the chat. If you think it's family, type that in the chat. I'm going to wait like 15 seconds and then we'll move on to the next one. So yeah, in this instance, almost everyone's saying work, and that aligns with what our responses were the whole time, because the whole time we kept saying we're going to go to the soccer game. Sorry. Everyone's responding work because work came up second. However, if I picked work over family, then work is the conflict. But if I picked family over work, then is work the conflict or is work the thing that's been shorted? So within our literature, we do tend to make this key distinction. So work-family conflict is going to be the conflicting demands between work and home. And then more specifically, we want to account for the direction. So when work wins out and family loses, then work interferes with family. And that would be when you choose the client. And then the other instance, when family interferes with work. So in this case, the game wins out, you go to see the game. That would be family interference with the work. And the reason we want to make those clear differentials, those clear differences, is because while the effects are going to be similar in direction, they are going to be different sizes. So generally speaking, when you have a lot of work interferes with family, you tend to have worse work outcomes, things like lower job satisfaction compared to when family interferes with work, and then you end up with worsened family outcomes. So with all that said, generally speaking, they are pretty consistent. So why do we care about work-family conflict? Because it's going to relate to a bunch of outcomes that we really care about. So it's going to relate to work outcomes. You're going to see more work-family conflict means lower job satisfaction, more turnover intention, more absenteeism, lesser task performance, and lesser helping behavior. So these are all things that obviously as employees, we want to avoid, and as organizations, we really want to avoid. We don't want people quitting. We don't want them missing work. We want them there, productive and happy. And that's not what we're finding here. In particular, helping behaviors is one of the stronger effects we have in IO overall. And in that instance, the rationale, in my opinion, is because if I don't have enough time to do what I need to for my work and what I need to for my family, then why would I take on extra responsibilities at work? Why am I going to help someone out on a project? Why am I going to mentor? Why am I going to provide social support? So on and so forth. And just take a minute to imagine how your work life would be different if nobody in your workplace was ever willing to help you out because everyone was experiencing a ton of work-family conflict. For me, that sounds really miserable. It does not sound enjoyable. It doesn't sound like anywhere I want to work. So just something to be mindful of there is the work effects here of work-family conflict. So why should you care? Because it's going to make work worse. Why else should you care? It's going to make people's family lives worse. So you see things like lower marital satisfaction. You see lower family satisfaction. You see lower family performance. And you see more family-related stress. Related to stress, we're all pretty familiar with the basic idea that more stress leads to bad outcomes, things like burnout, things like illness, so on and so forth. So if we can reduce stress, we can reduce those outcomes. We'll talk more about that in just a second. However, in terms of family performance, this is also an important note because how you are as a parent is going to affect your child's outcomes, right? So parents that have more work-family conflict, you tend to see things like worsened outcomes related to GPA, behavior issues, and the relationship between the parent and the child, and all these things that we really would like to optimize if at all possible. As the expression goes, children are the future, so let's take care of them. Work-family conflict gets in the way of our ability to do that. And lastly, it's related to health outcomes, and I don't know how else to tell you work-family conflict matters than letting you know that it's literally going to harm your overall health. So you're going to see things like lower life satisfaction. You're going to see more physical complaints, more depression, more stress. more anxiety, things that we really strive to avoid and minimize at any and all costs. Are there any questions thus far before I move into a bit more information on why we should care about work-family conflict? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay. So why else should we care about work-family conflict? Well, as IOs, it's become a really prominent topic in recent years. So there have been a number of popular press books that have really taken off and gained steam. So Lean In was written by Sheryl Sandberg. She was working at Facebook and wrote a whole book on how women can have it all, how they can be the great boss and the great employee and the great mom and the great spouse, so on and so forth. And that book was really popular. We have another book to the right of that called Happy at Work, Happy at Home. We hear all the time about the idea that happy workers are better workers. So we should strive for that. And inability to manage work and family, that's going to get in the way of that. And lastly is this book, The Working Dad Survival Guide, How to Succeed at Work and Home. So as you can see, the topic's relevant to women, it's relevant to parents, it's relevant to men. And really, it just seems to be a topic that people have really latched onto. We've all watched television, we've seen work-family conflicts, we've seen it in movies, so on and so forth. Additionally, why is it becoming more prominent? Well, part of the reason is changing gender norms. So if we go back to 1966, women really weren't in the workplace. By comparison, it looks like the majority of our talk today are women, which is really cool. And you think about how much change that's really been over time. But 1966, talking about 14% of women in the workforce. As of 1996, we had over 50%, and it's stayed over 50% since then. So with that, that's important because we are seeing more dual income families, essentially. So we're seeing more families that are dual income than we do where only the dad is employed. And we have seen an increase in mother-only employed. So what's the relationship between all this information and work family? Well, the answer is way back in 1966, work family was a bit different, right? Because women weren't working, so they weren't experiencing it. And because women were at home, their primary job was to be the caregiver. Dad's primary job was to be a breadwinner. So when work family came up, mom handled, when a situation came up that involved the needing of a parent to handle a family issue, mom handled that because that was mom's full-time job, essentially. Nowadays, though, both mom and dad are at work. So when an issue comes up, one of them has to sacrifice in that moment, thus creating this additional conflict where now decisions have to be made. Am I going to go home or is my significant other going to go home? So on and so forth. The kid needs to be picked up from school. The kid needs to be picked up from school. So we got to react accordingly. So we have this changing social dynamic. We also have the idea of technology changing over time. So I'm not going to pretend technology is all bad. In so many ways, it makes our lives easier. In so many ways, it makes life easier to manage your work and your family, right? So if I'm running late at work, I can text my girlfriend and say, hey, I'm going to be a few minutes late. Just hold off on making dinner so far. If I'm running late, I can text her and let her know and she can pick up groceries. Heck, we could even use Instacart and have groceries dropped off at our home. These are things that we couldn't have talked about as potential solutions even 30 years ago that we can now. On the reverse side of that, though, is now everyone basically has a supercomputer in their pocket. You can be reached no matter where you are, no matter when you are. You can be reached via text, via email, via phone call. And it's kind of become to some degree a 24/7 availability type of deal in a lot of places. I know for me in particular, my favorite example is I once answered emails from a Universal Studios line as I was waiting to go on Harry Potter. That's something that you wouldn't have talked about 30 years ago, but you do now. So it creates this additional layer of potential work-family conflict that can now emerge where in the past, you left work after your 9 to 5 and you were done for the day. There was no way to be contacted. And that simply isn't the case anymore, which opens the door for more decisions as to who do I prioritize, my work or my family. And then there's this changing economic landscape. This has really been highlighted during COVID, but people don't have the ability to miss multiple paychecks anymore. They don't have the ability to be laid off and continue on with their current lives. And as this stat shows here, about 31% couldn't miss any paychecks. 20% can only miss one, and another 15% can only miss two. And it doesn't even specify if that's a biweekly or a weekly paycheck. But regardless, that means 66% of people cannot afford to go without a paycheck for really any even short period of time. So it makes it difficult to choose family over work when that might have implications for your ability to provide for your family at all, which is something I always like to highlight. And that's completely ignoring the idea that healthcare is so deeply intertwined now with your employer. So losing your job in a lot of ways it's a major shakeup. In a lot of cases, you won't be able to recover from, at least in the immediate future, which creates this additional pressure and power dynamics that I think is always worth highlighting when we talk about work versus family and the choices between them. So what I've always found with any of these remote talks, it's really easy for the speaker to just go off on tangents. And I just want to make sure that everyone's interacting today. So if anybody has any questions or anything I've talked about thus far, please throw it in the chat. I'd be happy to answer it. Just make sure everyone's on the same page and I'm being clear and concise and whatnot. And I'm going to drink a little bit of water while I give y'all a minute to type. All right, going once. Oh, no questions. Thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. Okay, well, going twice, going once, going twice, and sold to the next slide. So how do we predict what will be prioritized? I think that's really an important consideration because really what work-family conflict is a moment to make a decision. So how do those decisions get made? So there's 4 components I want to talk about. So one is you have the idea of pressure. And pressure can come from the work or the family domain. Common sources from work are going to be your boss, your coworker, a client, people you don't want to let down. On the reverse side, it can just as easily come from family, someone like a parent, a child, a sibling, a spouse, someone that's exerting pressure on you to do what they need you to do. Next, we have the idea of support. Instrumental support is going to be when someone provides a solution. Emotional support is going to be when somebody just kind of tells you it's going to be okay and lets you know that they still love you, even if you choose to do the other thing. Easy example of that is I got a cat last week. This cat has had a number of issues since we got her. So I did not get a work assignment done. So I met with a collaborator today and I let her know what was going on. And her response to me was, Joe, don't worry about it. I know this isn't really your typical at all. I got you. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Letting me know that it was okay that I had let work be put second to my family. In this case, the cat. Beyond that, this idea of role importance. So within our chat, I gave y'all what I think is a pretty neutral option of work or family. And for the most part, y'all said soccer, implying that maybe this environment's a bit more family focused than another. However, on a reverse, let's say we're working at a really high competitive, maybe let's say a law firm where everyone's trying to get their top tier position and their promotions, their partnerships. Maybe in that instance, they're more likely to pick family over work. So things like that. So are you a work or family first person? It's easy way to think about that. The other thing I want to highlight is what role was prioritized last time. People do tend to kind of alternate because they don't want to let one roll down over and over and over and over again. Nobody wants to be that coworker that never pulls their weight, and nobody wants to be that member of the family that never pulls their weight. So we do see some alternating. So in terms of more specifics, it is a combination of all 4 factors. It's not one or the other. All of these considerations come into play. But more specifically, generally speaking, more pressure from a domain, more likely to prioritize it. So if your boss really emphasizes the need for this project to be done today, not done tomorrow, more likely to stay at work. On the reverse side, if your spouse is exerting pressure on you, like you've missed the last 6 games, the kid has realized that you're never there, maybe you're now more likely to prioritize family when a conflict moment comes up. More support from a domain makes you less likely to prioritize it. So like I said, my collaborator provided me a ton of emotional support. I knew she would. And thus I was able to kind of let family be put second to my work, and having those supports, whether or not it's your boss giving you a solution that you can get both done, you're more likely to prioritize the other domain that doesn't provide the support. Next is just kind of what we said, if a role is more important to you, more likely to prioritize it. So if you are a family over everything, family first person like my mom is, work always is the family for her, and that's completely okay. And my dad kind of does the reverse, where unless the family event is really important, work is going to win out, and that kind of works for them. But you're more likely to prioritize the role that's most central to you. And then lastly, if a role was prioritized last time, you're more likely to choose the other one. Like I said, nobody really wants to be that person that's never really ever pulling their weight, never really picking the one domain. So you do tend to see, generally speaking, that people tend to prioritize the one that got shorted last time, which makes sense. So what can we do? We've talked about how these conflicts can come up. We've talked about why they matter, but what can we actually do to minimize either the experiences of them or to deal with them as they come up? Because work family, it will emerge one way or the other. So one is use the resources at your disposal. And I say resources really broadly. Flexible work arrangements, really good one. If you have the ability to work at different times to accommodate your schedule and your needs, or if you can work from different locations, do it, as long as your organization allows it, but that will allow you to do it. You can also use your social support sources. I would really recommend doing so. So lean on your family, lean on your work, let them know what you need, let them know when you need help. Like I said before, if I'm running late at work, I'll shoot my girlfriend a text. She'll pick up food for that night. Or if I'm running really late, we won't cook that night. And she's completely okay with that. And social support, really helpful pretty much in all cases, especially with work family. Next is communicate what you need. People are not mind readers. We all wish they were. But if you don't tell people what you need and what's going on, they can't help you. So for example, if I didn't tell my collaborator what was going on with my cat, then she wouldn't have known that, and her interpretation of the events would have been very different. So be willing to communicate. Transparency, like Stephanie just said, communication is key. People are willing to help you, generally speaking, but you have to let them know that you need help. So communicate to your family what's going on, communicate to work what's going on. For our PhD program, we have this period of time that we call comprehensive exams. We basically get told to go home for 3 months and come back, and they're going to test us on a topic of their choice. We don't get to know what it is in advance. And I told my girlfriend in advance, I was like, the next 3 months are going to be rough. I'm going to have to prioritize work. I'm going to be working pretty much all the time to know this material. And she knew that going in, and she was cool with it. She was supportive the whole time. She helped me the whole time. And I think in a lot of ways, had I not been as transparent about that, that would have created a number of other problems in our relationship, wherein she would have felt stifled, or she would have felt unsupported or undervalued. And that wasn't the case. It was just a really important work time for me. And she knew that, and it all worked out. Next is allow yourself to separate from your roles. Like we said before, with cell phones in your pocket and email on your phone, it's really easy to be on work at all times. It's really easy to be available to your family at all times. What I would encourage you to do is when you're at work, be at work, be an employee first, prioritize that, put your effort there, make those hours as productive as you can within reason. And then when you're at home, be at home. Don't be answering emails during family time. Don't be answering emails during dinner. Don't be thinking about work during dinner. If possible, request the event days off, like Coach Lenny Romano. That's a cool name. I think your name is actually Lenny, not Coach Lenny. I apologize. But yeah, prioritize the events as needed, and be present where you are in that moment. When you're with your family, be with your family. When you're at work, be with work, so on and so forth. Next is be aware of the pressure that you put on others. You are not the only person experiencing work-family conflict. Your spouse is, your coworkers are, your subordinates are, your boss is too. So be aware it's not limited to you, and be aware of what pressure you're sending out into the world. Oh, we have questions. Sweet. Yeah, I was at the end of the slide anyway, so this is perfect. Given the fact the pandemic has provided the experience of working remotely from home, wouldn't that provide more opportunity to change the dynamic of work-life balance moving forward? For example, a hybrid schedule has helped making families benefit. Yeah, hybrid schedules are awesome. To talk about that on literally the next slide. So I'm just going to flip over. So as a manager, provide support. People need it. Be that boss that you would want someone to be for you. So simply offering flexible arrangements is not enough. You need to let people know that they can do it. So going back to what Karima just said, yeah, we were remote for a long time. At least we were down here. People showed that they can do it. Generally speaking, we didn't see major dips in production. So if people want to work home from 2 days a week, especially in New York, where I know commutes can be a bear and a half, let them take that extra hour and a half and give that back to them so they can go to the grocery store that day and food shop or meal prep, or they could spend that time with their kids or take their dog to the dog park or whatever they need to do to facilitate their own work-life balance, both in terms of production and efficiency and effectiveness, as well as satisfaction. But let people do that. Trust your people as they deserve to be trusted. So back to the original point of simply offering flexible arrangements is not enough. You need to let people know that they can use them without being punished for doing so, that they're not going to be passed over promotions, that it's not going to be questions over not they're working or whether they care, but that it's completely okay if they want to work from home or work different hours or whatever the case may be. Next is be wary of what signals you might be sending out there. And in particular, think about the language you're using, think about your word choice, think about your tone, think about your behaviors, think about your rewards, right? So if you say it's completely okay for people to work from home, but nobody does it in your office, a new employee might not perceive that it's actually okay. However, if you work from home and you encourage others to do so, and you make sure people use their PTO, and you make sure they go on vacations and so on and so forth, all of a sudden you've created an environment where people feel like they can do that. And that can make all the difference in whether or not they actually choose to do so or not. Also, going back to the idea of rewards, if you're working until 7 and you're only really forming really strong relationships with other people that are staying late, those people that get promoted, have you really created an environment where people can take off or that they can do so at a cost? So just be wary of what signals you might be sending out into the world. Clementi just asked, how would you recommend addressing individuals that constantly cross boundaries, making work requests outside of work hours? So a buddy of mine was interviewing at a bunch of different tech firms, and one of them told them that their response was, we're willing to accept your boundaries, but you have to establish them. So I think that in a lot of cases, really what it comes down to is just making sure that you're really holding on to your own boundaries and establishing what you want. So I know I worked at a place for a while where the boss in particular didn't realize that there was a really strong power distance between him as the CEO and all of his employees. So he'd be working on a Saturday and he would send an email, and in his head, they would answer it when they got in on Monday. But in their head, they just got an email from the CEO. It had to be urgent. So they would stop what they were doing. And he didn't realize he was doing that. So what he ended up doing is he wouldn't send emails. He'd leave them all in his drafts till Monday morning and then hit send on all of them. So little things like that. So being clear on what you're willing to allow, what you're not. I always make it a point with anyone I bring into our lab to tell them, like, I'm available to you 24/7. Shoot me a text. I will answer it when I see it. I can't promise it's going to be an immediate response, but I will get back to you. But I also make it known that that's not going to be an immediate response. Like, do not expect me to drop what I'm doing at midnight to respond to you. It might be in the morning. So I would say the big thing is just making sure that it's clear on what boundaries you're willing to have. And as a boss, being aware of what those boundaries are and what signals you're sending. So like I said, he didn't mean to be intruding in into people's lives. He didn't mean for that to be the effect, but that was what was taking effect. So I would say, again, just going back to the idea of clear communication and establishing what the norms are in an organization and really just adhering to them. I hope that answers your question. I think it does. If it doesn't, I'm happy to try again. Sweet. Next is, as a manager, help create solutions. Your employees are going to look to you for help, both in terms of what they need to be at work, in terms of who they need to be at work, and so on and so forth. So when they come to you with a problem, help them solve it. And be creative, right? So figure out what the root of the problem really is, analyze the resources that you can provide, and allocate them accordingly. So easy example is my girlfriend's a nurse, and she delivers babies. And when there's way too many nurses for the amount of people trying to deliver a baby, they send people home. So that they can they have more time at home to address what they need to. And in a lot of ways, that can help facilitate more sleep or more family performance, or so on and so forth. Other examples, if you're working in retail and somebody needs to go home because something came up and you can call somebody else in for that shift, or you can pick up some of their slack, do it. Help people facilitate those relationships. And that might seem like it's not your job, but in so many ways it is. The expression within HR, as long as I go back, is people don't quit organizations, they quit leaders. So don't be that leader people want to quit. If you really value keeping good employees, be sure to treat them well. And one way to show that they are valued and cared for is helping them provide solutions here, or providing emotional support, or altering timelines in ways that are not harmful to facilitate things, or so on and so forth. Or maybe it's as easy as just saying, all right, leave a little early, but make sure to finish that tonight before the morning because so-and-so needs it. So just allocate those resources as you can within your power to help people really get done what they need to get done. Okay, second, periodic call in for questions. Any thoughts, questions, concerns, clarifications? I am here to answer all of them and to get my glass of water. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate the positive feedback. Okay. So that was kind of a general overview of work-family conflict, but I did want to provide specific suggestions for typical kinds of work-family conflict because they're not all the same, right? So the three I'm going to focus on here are time-based. That's when you don't have enough time. So easy example is I can't attend work and my kid's game because they're occurring at the same time, and I cannot be in two places at once. That's time-based conflict, not enough time in the day. Strain-based is going to be a stress spillover. So think of any day where you just had a really long day at work and you got home and you just really didn't want to talk to your significant other, or you just really wanted to go lay down in bed, or you really didn't want to cook dinner or do the laundry. That's going to be a stress spillover. And essentially the idea here goes back to, I love to cite TV shows, but for those that have seen How I Met Your Mother, there's the chain of screaming, the idea that your boss yells at you, so you go home and you snap at your spouse then snaps at your kid then isn't nice to the dog, and we have this chain effect of strain just kind of spilling down. So that would be a strain based. And then lastly, we're gonna have behavior based. That's when behaviors in one area are cultivated, but they're not acceptable elsewhere. So mommy voice, perfect example. It's okay with a small child, not okay with a subordinate, not okay with a mentee, not okay with your boss. But it is okay in one environment. Other examples, maybe you work in the military and it's kind of okay to yell at subordinates given the environment, but you probably shouldn't do that when you go home. Maybe that's not the way to manage your home life, so on and so forth. So that's basically the basic ideas here. Out of curiosity, which do y'all most commonly experience? Just throw that in the chat, either type time, strain, or behavior. Got one strain. So yeah, we got a pretty good mix here of strain and time. Those really are the two most common ones. It's why they're easiest to conceptualize. In line with that, I'm going to spend the most time on those, and then I'll touch on behavior at the end. So in terms of tailoring solutions for time-based conflict, some things you might want to consider: flexible work arrangements. If you can adjust your schedule to make your time more efficient, then by all means, do it. If you can adjust your location to make your things more manageable, do it. With the reverse, if flexible work arrangements don't work for you, for some people they don't, right? I'm working at home, my family keeps popping in, my kids need a lot, I can't really focus on work, so I'm behind, that's causing me to stress out, then don't do it. It really is an individual difference, but little things can go a long way, right? So again, I grew up in New York, I know what that traffic looks like. So getting into the office before rush hour and leaving before peak rush hour can save a lot of time if that's an option. Working home 2 days a week and avoiding that commute altogether to give you time to meal prep, to handle family things, so on and so forth. Working extra hours so you can go to the dentist at a normal time, things like that. But use flexible arrangements as you can in the ways you can to most effectively handle all of your demands. Next is consider reallocating resources. And I encourage everyone to be as creative with their resources as they can. I know the expression is, it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to do everything. So be willing to use your village, right? So can you do one and then the other? Communicate with those around you and figure out what needs to be done now and what can wait till later. So going back to that initial example, maybe the client's okay if he comes at 8 instead of at 5 and he goes to the soccer game first. But he's got to communicate that. If he doesn't communicate that, then that's not going to work, so on and so forth. Or maybe he goes to the soccer game, but the wife drives the kid home, so they take 2 cars and he communicates that, so on and so forth. But use your resources as you can. If you can do one and then the other, that's super optimal. If you can even push one off for a day or so, again, super optimal. Easy example for us is we have a lot of laundry to do. So laundry can often wait a day. So for example, I'd rather be here. I can do laundry right after and space those commitments out and avoid that conflict. Next is, can you ask somebody else to help you get things done? And a lot of times people are willing to help, but again, you have to ask. Easy example I have from last week, or the week before rather, was we had this big recruitment event for all of our incoming students. I had a bunch of family things that ran late that day and I was exhausted. So I called a friend of mine that was going to the same event and I was like, hey, I know this isn't your job at all, but any chance you'd be okay with stopping at Starbucks, I'll pay for your coffee if you just stop and get them. So that was a resource that wasn't really available, but I got creative and I asked a friend for a favor and that's what she did. And I was able to get that coffee and stay awake and turn my extroversion on for the whole night. And that was because I was willing to lean on my network. So ask people for help. Like I said before, if I'm running late, my girlfriend to pick up the groceries so I don't have to do it, I'll do the same thing for her. And through that, you're able to maximize what you can get done in the same amount of time. Next, for strain-based, I like to think of strain-based kind of like a rubber band, right? You pull on it over and over and over again, and it's fine. And then eventually you pull it one too many times and it breaks and it's never the same ever again. So strain-based is kind of like that. It's a compounding problem of stress building up. Step one, create boundaries. And there's a number of different boundaries you can create. So one is psychological detachment. So when you're at work, be at work, don't think about home. Really let that part of you go for a little bit. Focus on where your attention needs to be. Same part is when you're at home, be at home. So when it's family time and you're watching TV, don't be answering work emails. Be present, be watching the show. Don't be that person that has to ask every 5 minutes what they missed because you really weren't in the room, even though physically you were in the room, and we've all been that person at some point. Try not to be that person. Next is temporal detachment, which is just kind of a strategy to help you get to psychological detachment of differentiate when work and family is. So from 9 to 5, I am Joe, the IO Psych grad student. And from 5 to 10, I am Joe, the significant other and the cat dad, and I cook dinner and I go play softball, and that's who I am at that time, and I let work go based on that clear time delineation. So you can use time as a resource there. You can also do it based on physical detachment. So use location to differentiate where work and family are. So for instance, my office is in this room. I close the door. And once I enter this room, I'm at work, and I try to treat that as my workspace. And this is now my work laptop, and I shouldn't be on YouTube or on Reddit or whatever else. And I should be focused on work while I'm in this room, and I create that clear physical differentiation. You can do the same thing with the second I get off the subway to go to work, I'm at work. The second I get on the subway to go home, I'm no longer at work. The minute I walk in the office door, the minute I walk in my home door, the second I get in my car. But find that moment in which you flip that switch and change the domain in which you want to be. And you can kind of think about that almost like code switching, even though I hate to kind of use that term here, but be the person that you need to be in that moment. And whatever helps you get in that mindset, use it. In undergrad, it's super silly. I used to put on a hat before I had to write something. And once I put my hat on at my work desk, my work brain would flip on and I would be able to work straight through. So whatever works for you, figure it out and do it. Next is be wary of burnout. We've all seen someone that's burnt out. We've all been that person that's burnt out. It's not fun. You're not your best self. So try to avoid that. 2 ways you can do that. One is mindfulness. And again, it seems so trivial, the idea that I can sit here and meditate for a few minutes and that I'll actually be better off for it. But yeah, the research does suggest that simply meditating and being aware and acknowledging your emotions and then actively choosing to let them go leads to improved health outcomes. It does buffer stressors. So be willing to take those few minutes to yourself and meditate. Be mindful. And next is find ways to recharge. So we all know breaks are helpful, but there is research out there that suggests the best kinds of breaks to take. As it turns out, the most effective way to recharge is to do something you like. So if you like to read, read on your break. If you like to go for a walk, go for a walk. If you don't like to read, you don't like going for a walk, don't do those things. Just because they work for someone else doesn't mean it has to work for you. For me, I don't find that television really recharges me. I find that it just makes me not want to get off the couch. So I try not to watch television on breaks. Instead, I'll go for a walk, or I'll play with the cat, or I'll play a video game even for a half hour, so on and so forth. I feel like that really recharges me. So figure out what works for you and do that thing. In terms of behavioral, again, this could be a bit less common. That's why it's a bit harder to conceptualize. So the solutions here are going to be a bit similar, but just be aware of your surroundings, be aware of where you are and who you want to be in that moment, and be aligned with that person. So don't be Joe, the IO Psych grad student that's talking about statistical theory over dinner. Don't be that guy. Completely fine at work. Don't do it at dinner. So be mindful, and then again, use those detachment strategies. Create those clear borders and those clear boundaries where once you step over them, I am this person instead of that person, and really just be that person that you want to be in that moment. And whoever you get there is up to you. I would recommend mindfulness and detachment strategies. That is all of the prepared material that I have for today. I'm pretty much right where I wanted to be on time, which I'm really proud of. We had a few questions throughout, which was cool. But again, this is really a dream come true for me. Like I said, I grew up in Staten Island. I'm really familiar with Baruch. My best friend graduated from Baruch. So this really is a dream come true. It's still kind of surreal. So thank y'all so much for having me. And I'm willing to answer whatever questions y'all have. And again, just thank y'all. Thank y'all so much for the kind words. So Clementi had a question. So workplaces tend to be more flexible with people with kids or caring for someone who is ill. How can individuals that have other family commitments make a case for themselves? I would say in that instance, really what it comes down to is just conveying that your family matters too, and making it clear. So I think generally speaking, I think it's more a blind spot than anything malicious where people just don't think about it. Like you're single. What kind of family demand could you have that's so pertinent? So again, I always tend to fall back on clear communication. I think that if you let people know what's going on, they're willing to acquiesce. So it's very different when you say, my pet is sick and I think I need to take her to the pet hospital versus I need to go home to take care of my pet. That second option could be that you forgot to feed them. It could be that you just want to go see your pet. It could be that maybe you think the pet's lonely. It could be 100 trivial things. But by really being clear on what the emergency is, it becomes more concrete and real. I think I'm a big fan of just complete unapologetic transparency. I find that it really does help in a lot of ways. I think generally speaking, people want to be good people. They just need that nudge in a lot of cases.
Well, it doesn't seem like we have any other questions, unless I'm wrong.
No, I'm not seeing any.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking your time to speak to us. And I want to thank everyone who attended today's session. As usual, we'll be sending out the event recording as well as the PowerPoint slides, most likely by tomorrow after we finish editing the video. Robinson put the link for our website in the chat box. So if you're interested, you can watch this video as well as our previous CUNY-IO talks. And hopefully you took away a lot of strategies that you can implement. And Kariba made a comment. What about employees who need a mental health break due to depression or high anxiety, but have no family commitments?
Yeah, so there actually, in a lot of cases, there are employee assistance programs that are specifically available for things like depression and anxiety. I think there's actually in a lot of states, I'm not familiar with New York, I think there are actually laws around that are supposed to help you get those. But again, you have to be willing to seek those out. You have to be willing to be transparent. Really what that is strain-based conflict. It's just a really high degree of it. It's an extreme case, but I think that's definitely something that you should be able to convey. And I think in a lot of cases, there are departments that are specifically designed to assist with that exact thing. And that would be my recommendation is if you have an organization that has one, use it. And if you don't, maybe encourage your organization to make one or mention it to a higher up, so on and so forth. But you should be protected in that instance.
Yeah, on that note, CUNY does have an employee assistance program that you can always find information through the campus HR departments. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, well, again, thank you very much, Joe, for speaking to us today about work-family conflict and providing those strategies, which I hope we'll all be able to utilize in our day-to-day lives. And thank you, everyone, for attending. As I mentioned, we'll send out the information about or the video as well as the PowerPoint. And then at some point or another, we'll send more information about our final IO talk for the semester. All right, so again, thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.
And I'm posting the PowerPoint in the chat now. It should be there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll save it and I will also upload it to our website.
Wonderful. Thank y'all again for having me.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.